Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday morning check-in time here at Westminster United Church, Thunder Bay. I hope this finds you well, and I hope that your May long weekend was a good one. And thank you. Thank you for tuning in this morning. We're here on Facebook Live Tuesdays at 11 a.m. for a quick check-in, Thursdays at 7 p.m. for evening prayer, and Sunday morning for prayer and reflection at 10 a.m., followed by the service over at the Trinity website at 10:30, which our congregation takes part in as well. And a reminder to our board members that the next meeting will be Thursday, May 28th. That's next Thursday at 7:30 p.m. following evening prayer. Now, like most of the ministers I know, at least the ones in pastoral ministry who serve congregations, I count out my life in Sundays. For example, May 2020 isn't just May. It's the 3rd, the 10th, the 17th, the 24th, and the 31st. The rest of the days in the month fill in around those Sundays. And this isn't a COVID-19 thing. It's a ministry thing. It's always been the case. I also live in the rhythm of the seasons of the church calendar. Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Holy Week, Easter, Pentecost, and Ordinary Time. But Sunday is the highlight of each week and each season. It's the point at which everything else that's happened throughout the week comes together. Not only in terms of worship and worship planning, but because Sunday also gathers together all of the needs and all of the activities and all of the things happening within our church family during that time. And so on Sunday, all of it comes together in prayer and consideration and reflection about what's happening in our world and what's happening in our church. Even in COVID times, Sunday remains my center point, the day when I'm most grounded in our life together as a community of faith. It's different now, certainly, but we are still the church, still together, even though we're apart. And I'll remind you again, because the cats both are playing with the flowers. They're not real flowers, and they can't really do any harm to them, so don't worry about them. So I miss you all terribly. And I miss hearing us sing together and pray together. And I miss the hum of conversation and laughter that happens before and after our worship services. I miss the chat in the coffee line. And I really miss that gathering of the children on the steps with their juice boxes and goodies after our worship service. There was an article this past week on the CBC website entitled simply "Reopen Ontario Churches." The article was about a letter sent to Premier Ford demanding that churches be allowed to gather again in worship. It was signed by just over 1,000 church leaders in the province. And I took a look at the list of those who had signed and initially thought, oh good, there aren't any United Churches. But it turns out I was wrong. There was one United Church in Southern Ontario that signed the document. The present United Church of Canada guidelines go against everything in that letter. The provincial guidelines for Ontario presently do not allow for more than 10 people gathered in any space for any reason, including churches. These church leaders, mostly from evangelical and Baptist churches, want the Premier to go against every bit of science, every bit of common sense, and make an exception for churches. Thankfully, the Premier ignored the letter. It is not the time for this move yet. It is not time for us to be together in worship as much as we might want to be. Not yet. Church gatherings present a particularly high risk of spreading the virus. So just a reminder to you, here's what happened at Westminster on March 15th, the last time we worshiped together in the sanctuary. That morning before worship, our board met and unanimously decided to suspend worship and all use of our building. It was a bold move at the time, and I'm so proud of our board for making that decision. When folks arrived for worship that morning, they were told to take a seat, but that they wouldn't be staying long. Kim made the announcement on behalf of the board and answered some questions. Carol said a few words of encouragement for us, and I offered some prayers. Then we all left. We weren't there more than 20 minutes. That same morning, March 15th, in a United Church in Calgary, 41 people gathered for worship and stayed following the service for coffee and cake to celebrate a milestone birthday for one of their members. They did everything right. They kept distance from one another. Only a few people handled and served the food. There was plenty of hand sanitizer and lots of hand washing. Of those 41 people, 24 became infected with COVID-19, 4 were hospitalized, and 2 died. The minister of that church said in an article she would give anything for a do-over. It's sobering to think that even though they followed every rule, that congregation was so tragically affected by this virus. The letter from those church leaders to the premier last week was irresponsible, and it was dangerous. They demanded that their churches be allowed to put people's lives at risk. I can assure you, we at Westminster will not be putting you at risk by getting back into our sanctuary too quickly. We will listen to the advice of scientists and follow the guidelines of the United Church of Canada and our provincial leadership. Really, though, if you think about it, the whole premise of that letter to the Premier was wrong. It was entitled, Reopen Ontario Churches. But if churches are to be reopened, that must mean that they're presently closed. Churches are not closed. Westminster is not closed. Our worship is suspended. Our group activities at the physical building are not happening, but we are not closed. We are still the church. And we gather in a different way, but we gather on Sunday for worship. We're all going to have to exercise some patience in all this. I can only speak for myself, but when I think about March 15th, when we last gathered, it seems like a lifetime ago. So much has changed since then. So much will continue to change. But one thing will not change. God's presence and God's love will continue to abide with us through it all and through whatever the future might bring. So wherever and however we are church, we can take comfort in knowing that God is always with us. And that's good news for me this morning. I hope it is for you too. That's just about all I've got this morning. I'll let you know that what I'm up to this week is I'm attending virtually a conference that I've attended in person several times called the Festival of Homiletics, which probably sounds about as interesting to you as watching paint dry. It's basically a bunch of preachers listening to a bunch of sermons from the rock star preachers of our time. And they are all broadcasting from wherever they live. And yesterday was the first day, and we started off with a wonderful sermon from the Reverend Tracy Blackman. And today and the rest of the week holds some great promise to hear some wonderful preaching and to just be inspired by the wisdom and the depth of the preaching at this event. So I'm really excited to take that on for the rest of this week, and that's about what's happening here. I hope all of you are well, and we'll see you back here Thursday at 7 p.m. For evening prayer. And until then, be well, be kind, and be safe. Bye, friends.